Good afternoon, it's 3 o'clock, it's Monday, and you're with Joe and Mike's award-winning virtual tours. We're back here in the Old Town, so we're going to give you a little walking tour. We're going to do a little reprise of our very first tour that we ever did. And if you want to go and compare how Edinburgh is looking now to what it looked like on the day of when we started to do this during the pandemic, go onto our YouTube channel and you can look at our back catalogue. So we're back here in the Old Town, we're in the Royal Mile. We're going to try and take you into the back streets of the Royal Mile, because this is where we like to take people, because it just exudes history. I mean, if these walls could talk, the stories they could tell, and we're going to try and give you some of these stories as well. So we're in Lady Stair's Close. We're going to take a wee walk around and we're going to look at Lady Stair's house here. Mike's going to talk a wee bit later about the developments that took place here in the Old Town to make it look what it is today. We're going to mention some famous people who were engaged in that. But I'm going to take you back to the 1600s, the early 1600s, and I want to show you this building here. We're in Lady Stair's Close, and this is Lady Stair's building. Now, it was actually known as Lady Grey's house. And I want to take you up here to show you a little bit of the history here. It's been long, if these walls could talk, the stories they could tell. But if we focus in here on the lintel here, see there's names of people on the lintel. And on the stones, the date, 1622, we've got Sir William Grey and Geddes Smith. You can see the names here is William Grey and Geddes Smith, going back to 1622. Fear the Lord and depart from evil, it says above the door. It was very common in those days for a newly married couple to be given a lintel stone for their house. So this gives us the dates to 1622. So the house is originally called Lady Grey's house. In the 1700s, it became Lady Stair's house, and Elizabeth Stair, or Lady Stair, was married to the Earl of Stair, or Lord Stair, and she then bought the house, but she was related. She was the granddaughter of William and Geddes, so that was actually sort of maintained it in the family. It's been renovated a couple of times. The first real big renovation was back in 1897. That was by Lord Rosebery, who renovated it. And then again, back in the 1960s, I believe, it was renovated again. It's now a writers' museum, and it's dedicated to three of our famous writers. So it's got Walter Scott, Robert Louis Stevenson, and Robert Burns. But the whole place here we're in at the moment is dedicated to poets. So we're actually in what we call Edinburgh's Poets' Corner, or the Macker's Yard. The Macker is the national poet. A Macker is nominated gets a title for 3 years, and I think the current one is Kathleen Jamie, and she is nominated usually by the First Minister of Scotland, but there is a committee, and they have a role, they are paid, they get a stipend of about £15,000, and the role is to encourage poetry, national poetry, throughout the schools, to write poems about events that affect Scotland at the time. And it's a well sought after position. And to mark all the different Mackers in the history of Scotland, a lot of the flagstones on the ground have got comments from some of the great and the good history of our writers and poets. I'm just looking at one here, James Boswell, 1740 to 1795. And he said, I rattled down the high street in high elevation of spirit, which is great. And we've got another one here, one of my favourite ones, who I studied when I was in high school, is George Mackay Brown. And he says, in the fire of images, gladly I put my hand. I had to study George Mackay Brown for my higher exams.
I'd like to make a mention. Hello folks, by the way, here's Mike here behind the camera.
We just got sirens going on in both ends
here. I know,
there's
a lot of noise going on today, but I would like to actually mention Dorothy Dunnett, because I've just completed a book, and it was called The Game of Kings, not The Game of Thrones. And I really enjoyed it because it was this character called Francis Crawford of Lymond, And she has a series of books called the Lyman Chronicles, which traces this character's escapades from way back to the time of Mary Queen of Scots. And this was all about the rough wooing and how Scotland was governed at the time. So Dorothy Dunnett, if you look out for that one, Game of Kings, it's worth a read, actually. Enjoyed it, yeah.
Yeah, and one of our colleagues, Barbara McLean, she's a big fan of Dunnett as well. So she's the one who always advocates it. Very good. And we've got a little monument here to the Scottish War Poets as well. So it's the Scottish War Poets Corner. This was unveiled just a few years ago as a monument to it. But I want to talk a wee bit more about some of the characters in here, because Lady Stair was related to, she was the wife of Lord Stair. Now, Lord Stair was, some say, an infamous character in Scottish history. And Mike, you can chip in here as well, because it all goes back to the 1690s. I'm talking about the Massacre of Glencoe up north. In 1690, King James VII was deposed, went into exile into France. William of Orange came over during the Glorious Revolution, and it was expected that all of the clans in Scotland were going to have to sign the document. It was a test act. Basically, had to sign your allegiance to William of Orange. And some of the clans up north were either Episcopalian, so they weren't Presbyterian, or they were Catholic, and they didn't want to really sign it. But reluctantly, they did. So they had to sign it by a certain date, and I think it was December 31st, 1691, they had to sign this Test Act. So the MacDonalds of Glencoe kind of hummed and hawed about this, but they did finally say, we're going to sign it. They actually wrote to James VII in France, and basically for your own safety, he said, sign it. But the people in Edinburgh really wanted to make an example of some of these clans up north as well, and Lord Stair was one of these characters. So the MacDonalds went up to Fort William to sign this document. When they got up to Fort William, they were told, actually, it's down in Inverary you have to go to, so it was a wasted journey. So by the time they got down to sign the document, they had gone past the deadline, but they did sign it. But Lord Stair down here had heard that MacDonalds were late, and he wanted to make a real example of it. And it was said he was playing cards one night. Now, whether this is true or not, we'll see. But he said he was playing cards one night with his friends. Lord Ormiston was there. And as they were playing cards, they wanted to sign the order to make an example of the MacDonalds. And so they signed this order on the 9 of Diamonds. And the 9 of Diamonds has always been known as the Curse of Scotland. So what transpired was that a militia was set up by the Duke of Argyll, so they were Campbells, and they were then set up to the Glencoe. And when they got to Glencoe, it was in the middle of a blizzard, and the MacDonalds had no idea what was going to happen, and they gave shelter to the Campbell militia, and they were all there. And then after a few days, they were ensconced there, they got fed, they were given dry clothes, they were able to dry their clothes, get warm shoes, getting fed. They were really looked after. It was Highland hospitality at its best. But then the signal was given for the massacre to begin, and I believe about 30 people lost their lives on the night, but quite a few of them went up into the mountains, and some more may have died up there. So it was known as the Massacre of Glencoe, and it took place in February 1692, I believe. And it's been always marked as one of the worst incidents or a black mark in Scottish history. And I always say, like nowadays, if you get invited to a wedding where it includes a Campbell's and a McDonald's, don't go. Because I'll always end up in a fight. And you married a Campbell, didn't you?
I know, I married a Campbell.
When I'm on the coach tours, Mike, I always talk about the McDonald's and the Campbells and the whole thing. And still, nowadays, this animosity between them. But I always think, well, look, the Campbells went on and they created this soup company, so they make really nice soups. And the McDonald's went on to form a hamburger chain, so there you go.
As in Andy Warhol's soup cans as well.
Yeah, exactly, exactly that. But this whole place is like one great big movie set. And I think if you just take a scan around, Mike, you can see the beautiful places that we have here.
Well, maybe move down here, the signal might be a wee bit better, just coming down a little bit further. Yeah.
I mean, and you just get an idea how high these buildings are, because we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stories on this side. But if you go onto the other side of these buildings, they drop down for about another 3 or 4 stories. And these buildings were probably the highest in Europe at the time. If you go back to the 16th century and the 17th century, these are the tallest buildings in Europe. And that caused a bit of a problem because there was no running water. No running water meant no flush toilets. So you had to keep a potty under your bed. What did you do if your potty was full? Well, every night, round about 8 o'clock there used to be a shout of Gardez-vous. Gardez-vous means beware of the water. And all the windows would open up, and all the effluent that you had gathered from all day and all the stuff would just get thrown out the windows. So Edinburgh was actually stinking then. So this whole idea, and Boswell wrote about this, this habit of the Edinburghers, the citizens, actually opening up and throwing it out. Now, I've heard a story, and Mike, I don't know if you've heard of this as well, but the whole expression of getting really drunk, you get shit-faced. Have you heard that?
Yes, yes, yes.
And it's like, so 8 o'clock, when people are coming at the pubs are, they're walking out the pub, quite inebriated, and they all shout Gardez-vous, and they look up, and it lands on their face, hence you get the expression shit-faced. I would like to believe that's true. I think we could own that, shall we? So we take it as our own.
Yeah, we'll move along over here a wee bit, Joe, because I'd like to talk about this house here, which is called Blackie House. I'd like to show you this house here because it's called Blackie House, and some people might just walk past us, but quite an important individual stayed here called John Stuart Blackie, and he was a very clever chap. He was actually a professor of languages at Edinburgh University. He taught Greek and was very highly thought of. He also dipped into divinity, did divinity studies in terms of qualifying to be a preacher or a minister. But he is very well known in terms of his support of the Gaelic language and a Scottish identity and Scottish culture. So our kilts today, our use of the Scots language, much of that would actually stem back to the person who stayed in this block here called Blackie House. Now, the whole area here used to be individual streets. It was not this big open space. If we're going back before the 19th century, then there would have been little narrow closes, as we call them, and Edinburgh's got about 73 closes or pedestrian accesses in the Old Town, and there would have been a narrow one coming down here, and the buildings would be very close together, meaning to pack as many people into a small space as possible, and the conditions were pretty awful. And even became worse in the 19th century after the new town opened across on the other side of the valley in the 18th century, because a lot of the middle classes, a lot of people moved away and many houses became vacant, and some of the ones that weren't vacant, landlords were exploiting the people that were there, and the conditions were very unhealthy with overcrowding as well. And some of the buildings went on fire because they were empty, and people would just throw waste paper around and stuff like that. And but this was opened up in the 19th century by a chap called Patrick Geddes, and I'm going to speak about him later, but I'm going to hand the camera, we'll switch back over and Joe can have another little chat about the history of the area.
I just want to take people into you find these little corners everywhere you go, but I just want to have this. First of all, there's a little bee hotel here, which I love.
Oh, fabulous.
There's a little bee hotel for the bees, to get the bees into the Old Town here.
These are things you miss, that you just walk past sometimes,
And Mike, if you want to open up that gate there.
Oh, yeah.
I just want to...
Well, there we go.
There we go. Just take a wee step in here. I always say in Scotland it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Yes, yes.
But I just want to show, we're actually in Macker's Corner, and we've got a little bit of poetry in somebody's garden here. My love is like a red, red rose. This is my country. That's from Andy Gray. So people are really proud of the places where they live. And there's that famous expression, we're all Jock Tamson's bairns. You can explain that, Mike.
Yeah, that goes back to the minister at Duddingston Church. If you remember our tour of Duddingston Church, and Jock Thompson was the minister there, and it was all about people being the same,
up here.
sense of community, people belonging, supporting each other, being all of the same family. And I think this is the back of Deacon Brodie's pub,
Yeah.
because I'm looking right through the window there, and I don't know if any of you have ever been into Deacon Brodie's pub on the Lawnmarket in Edinburgh, but we sometimes take our guests there. I'm sure you've done that as well, Joe. As well.
Do you want to explain who Deacon Brodie
Deacon
is?
Brodie, going back to the 18th century, he was the iconic Jekyll and Hyde, if you like, because during the day he was a very upstanding carpenter who made furniture, joiner, and at night he was a villainous thief who led two separate lives. Said that he would steal the keys and make a duplicate set of keys off the people's houses and workshops to go back in there at night when they didn't know. And he carried on this double life. He was a terrible man. He had many mistresses. He had a terrible gambling habit.
Yeah.
And he had an addiction to stealing. And he had a gang of people who assisted him in doing that. But nobody knew for a minute. I wouldn't suspect that such a high upstanding person who was something to do with the running of Edinburgh, like a town councillor, a deacon who was quite high up in the guild of corporations and manufacturers and things like that, because this was the merchant city. But he was eventually caught, and he had escaped to the Netherlands, and he was brought back to Edinburgh, and he was hanged on the gallows, a gallows he designed himself. And it was said that he made a metal tube to go down his throat, that when the rope tightened, he would survive. And after the hanging, his body was quickly taken away, and some say he survived, but who knows?
And he was the one that inspired Robert Louis Stevenson, because Robert Louis Stevenson's family had a cabinet made by Deacon Brodie as well.
That's it.
There you go.
Deacon Brodie, yeah, and his workshop wasn't very far away from here.
And what's the word that we learned about that? About the Caledonian split personality?
Oh.
Caledonian anti-zizigi.
Oh,
remember that word?
Okay.
That's a great word. We should test people on that
This
later
thing
on.
about dualism as well, which was a very popular subject for authors at the time.
Yeah.
And Confessions of a Justified Sinner by James Hogg is about a devil sitting on a person's shoulder and encouraging this person to do all sorts of bad things.
But even Walter Scott's books are all about the split personalities as well, because there's always the one who either fought for the Jacobites or fought for the Hanoverians. Everything's split. And I think it goes back to Edinburgh's split, because it's split with the Old Town and the New Town. Because the New Town was all buttoned up and Presbyterian, and the Old Town was where all the opium dens were. This is where all the fun was, up here. And then you got Scotland is split in terms of religion. It's also split in terms of language. So there's this what they call the Caledonian anti-zizigi.
Yeah, because you have this reputation of the New Towners being very correct.
Yeah.
And never would do anything bad. And of course, probably there was more worse things going on in the New Town with the middle classes and the professionals than there were that was going on in the Old Town with the poor people striving and scraping a living. So a city of contrast.
I think the word we're looking at here is hypocrites.
Hypocrites, yes. I'd like to show you here this opening, and this is called Wardrop's Court. And
this is
the
beautiful
opening
here.
to this, well, in this area, Joe, there was a house where Robert Burns, our national poet, stayed. But with the guy I'm going to talk about more, who was Patrick Geddes, who was a town planner and sociologist who wanted to clean up the old town. If you look at these two dragons, now these dragons commemorate the improvements and forward-looking personality of Patrick Geddes, because they were sculpted by his 16-year-old son, who was called Arthur Geddes. And they are a memorial to Patrick Geddes's very good, forward-looking look at the old town and how it should improve, how people would connect with their communities, how they would support each other, where the shift from the old town to the new town in the 18th century left the old town in a bit of a bad way, and the people were left to just get on with it in the old town. But he wanted to bring back a social mix of people from different backgrounds to be able to interact and also to treasure the beauty of Edinburgh's Old Town, which was being neglected. So he was one of the first green thinking personalities, because he believed that some of the empty, disused areas should be put to mean with grassy areas, with trees, and with plants, and areas which were open for people to enjoy, to establish this social well-being, if you like, because Patrick Geddes, 19th century guy, he was born in about 1850s, but he lived right into the beginning of the 20th century, and he was a very significant guy.
Big social reformer as well.
Social reformer.
Professor at the university, conservationist, and he took on the city council. He's quite an influential guy here, and I think he actually established the first student residencies here at Edinburgh University as well, and actually lived in that area.
In fact, we're going to pop over there in a minute or two.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
You don't mind me just having a wee... You're live.
You have to ask Hazel though.
Hello Hazel, how are you? You find the strangest things here in
She's the
Edinburgh.
boss.
She is, she's gorgeous. What kind is she?
It's a Eurasian eagle owl.
Eagle hour, absolutely gorgeous.
Eurasian eagle owl.
And what's your name?
I'm Alex.
Alex. And you're down the Royal Mile quite regularly over the summer, so if any of our viewers who are coming into Edinburgh, they come and say hello to you?
Throughout the year, Friday, Saturday, Sundays and Mondays usually.
Okay.
Golden eagle there.
Oh, Golden Eagle. Oh, wow.
What's there? You can have a look at it.
Is he tame? Oh, he's got his... There's a Golden Eagle. Oh, look at that. Absolutely gorgeous. And do you do falconry?
I'm a falconer. I breed falcons as well, but
Yeah.
just small numbers of falcons.
And where do you do it? Do you do public shows?
Haven't done any flying displays for a long time. Probably again shortly. It wasn't organised display, but I was exercising a falcon down at Holyrood Park quite often in the evening when I finish work here.
Okay.
And I sometimes fly an owl in Wardrope's Court here just for exercise.
That keep the pigeons away.
No, he's caught a few rats recently.
Oh, good.
It was mostly just for exercise to start off with, but I did teach him how to chase rats, and now he's managed to catch 3 in the recent
Well, we don't
days.
have rats in Edinburgh,
No,
surely.
we don't have rats. They're dummy fake rats. Fake rats.
Yeah, and I'm Pinocchio. Listen, thanks for that. You're live, by the way, on Facebook too. Quite a few
Yeah,
hundred
I
people.
want to remain live.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, we all do, I think.
Cheers. Thanks for that.
What's the name of your
Joe and Mike's
Joe and Mike's?
virtual tours, award-winning virtual tours.
Okay.
You get us on
What
Facebook. Or you get,
emphasis on the award-winning?
yeah, we are European champions.
Are you?
We like to say that. When's the last time Scotland won? Joe and Mike's award-winning. This is great. Just coming into the Royal
Fantastic.
Mile.
And the sun's come out.
Instagram, Hazel is an owl.
Yeah. Okay.
Hazel, all one word,
it's still not
Hazel
going.
is-
Hazel is an owl on Instagram. So you want to say it again?
On Instagram, Hazel is an owl.
Okay.
And we are sort of collectively known as Northern Raptors.
Northern Raptors.
Northern Raptors.
Brilliant.
Very good.
And I'm known as the Birdman of Alcopops.
Birdman of Alcopops. That's brilliant.
Fantastic.
That was my own name. Thanks.
Thanks for that. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Super.
And
That's so
we've
great.
had characters
You know what?
like that from way back in history in this part of Edinburgh, you know, the
Yeah.
Lawnmarket. I'd like us,
Yep.
Stuart, to have a wee look at this building here, because we talked about Patrick Geddes being a social improver. Well, he had a hand in this building here in bringing people back to live in the old town of Edinburgh. And people traditionally in the old town of Edinburgh, and if you think about the Industrial Revolution, the smokiness and all the kind of antisocial conditions that people had to live in, overcrowding, low wages and things like that. People had a very poor relationship with their rent collectors. And Patrick Geddes was very aware of that, and he wanted to have a much better perception of people coming to collect payment. So this was one of the earliest tenement projects going back to the 19th century, where people took pride in their accommodations. They were not overcrowded, it was quite nice accommodations, and the rent collector had a nice relationship with the tenants, a nicer relationship. So it was all to do with community and pitching in and helping your fellow person, your fellow man, your fellow woman. So a great forward thinker was Patrick Geddes. And you can see these little statues, little heads underneath the windows, the bay windows there. And I think on this one here you've got a boy, a student perhaps, on the left-hand side with school books on the left-hand side. And I think I can see cricket bat. Sporting accessories on the right-hand side there as well. So another little hidden gem there to look out for. Yeah.
And of course next door we've got the house that Robert Burns actually stayed in as well.
Yeah, and you can see the entrance to Eddie Stairs course is just here that we came from. And notice once again how tall this building is here. This building is Gladstone's land, and it was a merchant of the 17th century who stayed here, and Lawnmarket translates into being linen market, and this was a market area for textiles, for linen, but also other forms of cloth were sold in open booths and stalls in this area close to the castle. So you can just imagine how busy it was. And the man that owned this place here, he was having ships that would take goods over to Europe, to the Netherlands and beyond, and then bring back goods. So he was quite a wealthy individual, and then top of that he would have one of the first Airbnbs, if you like, where he would be letting out the apartments to different people. And if you go and visit today, if you haven't done this for a few years to Gladstone's land, you'll see they've totally changed the layout, because they've updated it to show you people were living in here in the 19th century. And I think there was a dressmaker's workshop and shop which has been reformed in one of the levels here too. So if you wanted to go and buy goods, then you would go in this outer stair up through the stair tower and visit whoever you were going to go and visit up here.
And we've got the kite, because this is Gladstone's land, but the old word, Scottish word for a kite, the bird, was a gled.
That's right.
So
this is the red kite.
That's a symbol.
It's a gled.
And the kites actually were used to catch the rats, as our friend from the Alcopops.
Another connection there. Fantastic. And this is run by the National Trust for Scotland.
It's well worth it.
And it's well worth a visit, for sure.
Yeah. And there's a nice, and they've opened up a little cafe in there as well, which they didn't have before, which is nice.
So I think what we're going to do is we're going to pop over to Riddles Court.
Just take a wee
and
view
then we'll
down
come back
the
over
Royal
and
Mile.
Joel take over from
Giles there.
some of the other courses further up, but we're going to be careful crossing the road here.
And Mike, remember when we first started doing this, the street was empty. It was like a ghost town.
It was unbelievable. You know, you can see how it's picking up now. It's beginning to build quite slowly, but it will come back.
So let's go into Riddles Court.
Yeah, we'll go quickly through first of all, so that we can maybe get a signal so we don't lose you, hopefully. Right, so Riddles Court, again, this is a hidden gem to many people. Many people will go and visit Lady Stair's court, just where we've come from, and then they'll forget about coming in here. But this is a very beautiful little corner here of the Lawnmarket. And if you look above here, vivendo decimus, which means learn through life, through living. And this was one of the criteria that Patrick Geddes found very important, was through experience of things. He wasn't a success at passing examinations, Patrick Geddes. He was a very clever chap. He was a sociologist, he was a town planner, he was a biologist, he was studying zoology and all sorts of different things from the great and the good of the time. But put him in an examination room to be spouting forth what he'd stored or remembered in his head without conceptualizing, if you get what I mean. He was against rote learning, just putting down screeds of information. And so he wasn't he wanted a blend of learning techniques where you would have practical activities as well as listening to lectures and things like that too. Now, there is a famous quotation I'd like to read to you, which I love. I love this, because if you look here, there's little plaques, and each of these little plaques has got leaves and different types of leaves on them. And sometimes you'll just walk over them and not notice what they're about. Now, leaves were very important to Patrick Geddes, and I'll just read you this little bit of, it's not poetry, just a little bit of prose here. And he says, "By leaves we live, yet the leaf is the chief product and phenomenon of life. This is a green world with animals, comparatively few and small, and all dependent upon the leaves." So that was very important to his whole mindset, in that he wanted us to connect. We are from nature. He didn't want us to lose track of nature. And he was also allied to a group called the Arts and Crafts Movement of the late 19th, early 20th century, where because of industrialization, people were losing the ability maybe to know what nice things were, what beauty was in the landscape, and what all the natural physical world has to offer. Then he was wanting to bring that back to us as human beings, because he believed that space to live, not to be hemmed in, not to be totally enclosed, to be able to get some idea of what the natural world is like, was very important to him. So that is a connection with Patrick Geddes, as this building is. The building goes back to the 16th century, and it hosted a gathering with James VI of Scotland and his wife, who was Anne of Denmark. They came to this building and were entertained. We'll just take a little walk down this bit here.
And we've got the quotation of "By leaves we live" on the door.
By leaves we live, and you've still got these little, you see there's still more of these little leaf plaques there as well. But if you look here, this doorway, this was a doorway originally. This has been much changed over the years and added on to, and it's been recently modernised and restored. But here was the entrance to Baillie McMorran's house. And Baillie McMorran, he was quite an important person here in Edinburgh. And he was the treasurer. He was the city treasurer. And we're going back to the 16th century. So he was the city treasurer, and he was also a merchant. And just got some of his experiences were quite amazing, because because of his power in running the city of Edinburgh, there was a demonstration in the high school of Edinburgh by the students, because they wanted to get longer holidays, and they were occupying the building of the high school. And Baillie McMorran was called upon to go with a group of other high-up people in the council to go and get these kids out of the school. So with the help of his retainers, McMorran took this great big bit of wood and started to try and batter down the door of the school to get access. And one of the children took a gun and shot Baillie McMorran and killed him on the spot in the 16th century.
That's
so
retribution for you.
That was quite something.
Yeah.
And I believe that he was, Sinclair was the name of the boy. And of course, last week we were talking about Rosslyn Chapel and the Sinclairs. So this was McMorran's house, just where this doorway was.
And in here, they've got an original painted ceiling. And a few years back, this was the venue during the Edinburgh Festival, and I saw Maggie Smith do a one-woman performance in here.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was great.
As in Downton Abbey, Maggie Smith
Maggie Smith
in
in
Downton
She was in
Abbey.
here doing a one-woman show. It was absolutely stunning. And again, these are the little places that a lot of people don't visit when they come to Edinburgh, because some of these closes look dark and foreboding, but history is in here. And
Yes.
how quiet it is. But again, you have to say, Mike, people live here. This is people's houses as well, you know. People still live here. All modernised inside, of course. But you can hire out this place. You can rent it out for weddings as well.
Well, talking about Patrick Geddes again, because he bought this place, he took it over, because it was in quite a bad way, because of what I said about the industrialisation and about the new town and people leaving this to be a slum area. This was one of his earliest projects, where he bought this place and he transformed it into a university hall, a place for the students. So you're talking about like a university residence, a university community hall where the students would meet. And so that today is still a legacy here, because I believe this is a learning facility today.
This was
Riddles
this
Court.
used to be an adult workers' college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it still is with the ethos of Geddes to this very day, and you can
And
see.
the colours are great. The wash, the lime wash is beautiful, golden, pinky.
I mean, this has gone back to like what would be in the 16th century, the times of Mary Queen of Scots and things like that. So you can see the amazing hodgepodge of stonework and additions as well, because it was totally transformed over the years by the different people that stayed here.
Well,
and also, David Hume stayed here.
Yep.
Before he moved across the street to James Court. And David Hume, of course, treatise in human nature, inquiring into human understanding.
One of the great men of the Enlightenment.
Great Enlightenment figure who was against metaphysics, who was against things like religion, and all of these things today we still are quite connected with. Well, he was a bit of a revolutionary at the time, was David Hume, and it
was Voltaire who said that we look to Scotland for our ideas from all the guys, that the great men of the Enlightenment, and even Voltaire in France saying we look to Scotland for our new ideas. So, and lucky for him, he was around in the 1700s, because 100 years earlier he would have been burned as a heretic.
Yep.
Again, a great little place to explore. So if you go on one of our tours, and again, I don't know if anybody's was on here from University of Purdue, but I took the kids in here, and I think they were blown away by the alleyways of Edinburgh. We're back on the Royal Mile again.
Back on the Royal Mile.
And you can see there's so much construction getting on. It's like everybody's woken up now to get the things done. Now you can get people to do it, because before the backlog of getting stonemasons and workers.
It's all happening. You can hear the busking bagpiper, you can see the open top buses, and you can see people going up to the castle. Yeah,
and I hope people will look back at our original one, Mike, just to have a comparison as to what it was like when we were here. Like, this place was coming like a ghost town when we first started.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't know if you want to take us through the next little court.
So we're going to James Court here?
Yeah, we're going to James Court.
There's a little dedication in here. Again, it's got an association with Patrick Geddes, but it's for a more contemporary, a more modern young woman. It's a woman who, she died in a diving accident in the Galapagos Islands. Again, we might lose the signal in here, but hopefully it'll be okay when we come back through. And if you go in and you explore at the back, the noise of the Royal Mile, and you come back in here, it's so quiet.
Well, you know, I used to go down here. There used to be an amazing shop down here, down the stairs. It was a bagpipe shop.
Yep.
And this was going back to the old artisans where they actually made the bagpipes on the spot. And the smell in there of sheepskin and wax and all this stuff that you put together to make the bagpipes go. I think the guy was called Hagen, who ran the shop here, but it's no longer here. unfortunately, but it was one of these great wee shops.
But again, it's just gorgeous here. You've got the trees. So this is where like the life would take place of the people, the residents here. And if you go back here, look, there's wee pubs, and it's very quiet. I like to come in here during the festival.
Yeah.
Because you can get a place to eat somewhere, because it's just the Royal Mile is absolutely chock-a-block and you can't move. But you come into these little closes, and again, have a look at the buildings here. They're just stunning.
You can see how high they were, but this is an important place.
Back to the Gare du Loup.
It's an important place in Europe. It was like the top medical centre, even internationally, and it was a hubbub of great minds and followers and students, and today it still is. It's still known all over the world as a place to come to, and that is why we get so many people visiting Edinburgh, because there's a bit of everybody here, I think,
And this tall building we're looking at here, Mike, is actually a university residences.
Yeah.
And this is for PhD students. But look, there's a little apartment for sale there. Look.
It would be interesting to know how much that's going for.
Yeah. Maybe somebody could check it out. Thornton's, we'll get the telephone number. Surely somebody will be able to go online and have a look at this.
Yeah. Maybe as we speak, somebody will be able to
somebody can do it live. Here's a little challenge. I've just been asked, is there going to be a military tattoo this year? There is going to be a pared down version of the military tattoo.
Yes, it's going to be a bit reduced, but they're still selling tickets for it, and the tickets are selling fast. Last time I looked, I usually take my son on his birthday to go and see it, and there wasn't a huge number of seats left. So if you're wanting to go, check it out soon. Yeah.
So this is a little monument dedicated to a woman called Susanna Alice Stephen. She studied languages at St Andrews University, and then she went to live in London for a while, came back up here, and she studied landscape gardening and landscape architecture. And she was very much influenced by Patrick Geddes as well.
Yes.
And because she was a landscape gardener, we've got and she died down in the Galapagos. So we've got the little parakeets. I think the parakeets is a symbol of and we've got a little trug. The little trug is the basket that gardeners use. And again, the leaves.
Yeah, the leaves. You see, this has gone back to Patrick Geddes so much, isn't it?
She was influenced by Patrick Geddes. Yeah. She knew, she was influenced to study back in Edinburgh, and she actually was fundamental in the landscape gardening movement up here. And she had a very short life. There's a lovely, lovely little Maori quote, which you could probably read out.
Yeah, it says, "Keep your face towards
the sun.
The shadows will fall behind you." And that is a Maori proverb.
Yeah.
And
this was it. This was it meant as a seat, so you meant to relax on it as well. And this was done by the friends of Susanna Alice Stephen, and she got the date here, 1960 to 1997.
And there's these wee leaf motifs are all over it, and the more you look, the more leaves you see, which are scratched into the stonework. So,
and now you know that the leaf is also the symbol of Patrick Geddes, so we've got the connections there as well. And we're looking at the back here of there's two religious buildings here. One is the Old College, which is the School of Divinity, but this is the school for the United Free Church. So the Presbyterian Church split in the 1800s.
Yep.
And so, but they are side by side, and we're looking at the back of the United Free Church main building here in Edinburgh. And Susanna Stephen's forebear, I think it was maybe the grandfather or maybe great-grandfather, actually was of the United Free Church, and he operated in here.
Yeah. And
he dedicated a chair, a high chair, like a big chair, that's just still in here. And so she had associations with Patrick Geddes, but also with the United Free Kirk here in Scotland.
I think there's this window,
stained glass, beautiful
in here, and
when it's lit up at night, it's absolutely gorgeous.
I feel like that's King James VI in the centre there. And I know that George Buchanan, who was his mentor, if you like, when James VI was quite young, and educated him into literature. And of course, James VI is the Bible.
The Bible. He was baptised a Catholic, but he was brought up as Protestant.
Right, yeah. You don't really see this very clearly, folks, see it, even from where we're standing, because you would obviously see it from inside with the light behind.
And I will say, you can go into these places, they are open to the public. And you just go in and they'll invite you in. You can go into the old college, right next to it is a United Free building, and you can go in and they'll invite you in.
Yeah.
We've got here, James, thank you, Francis. 1 bedroom, 1 bath flat offers over 175,000 and it's been sold, subject to contract. Thank you, Francis.
Offers over, so it could be quite considerable.
Offers over, it could be 200,000, 225?
Could be more, yeah.
1 bedroom flat.
And then it would make the perfect Airbnb, wouldn't it, Joe?
That's what it's going to be.
Yeah,
I think so. So it's investment time. Now the tourists are coming back.
So you've got all these back areas and the backs of pubs and so on, and the Jolly Judge, which is the pub that is just down here.
It's a nice wee pub.
And you can see all the casks, the barrels here lying outside. And you can take what's called a Patrick Geddes walk.
Yeah.
And they used to have little plaques on the wall sometimes to show you
Here we are.
significant bits that would connect with it. In fact, there you go. Well spotted.
Trust me, I'm a guide.
Yes. So he was quite a fashionable looker, wasn't he, Patrick Geddes? He had the hair and the beard. He looked like the...
He was very dapper.
Yeah.
He was well known walking around the town because he actually owned one of the big attractions here. He owned Camera Obscura, and he actually called it the Outlook Tower.
Yeah.
And this is where he would take the Outlook Tower. If we get an opportunity, we'll go up there today. I just want to show you the Jolly Judge pub here. It's a nice
He would be what would be called an influencer nowadays.
Very much an influencer.
Yeah.
Very much.
In terms, we know about social media and how people get influenced, but he was a major one. And here we've got James Boswell's house.
Yep.
Dr. Johnson, of course.
Johnson and James Boswell.
James Boswell's trip to the
Lovely.
Highlands. You maybe remember my story about the White Horse pub down in the Canongate when James Boswell first met with Dr. Johnson in Edinburgh. Dr. Johnson was a bit grumpy, fed up. Stagecoach had come, dropped him off, and he was ordering lemonade from the bartender. And the bartender just took a bit of lemon in his fingers and popped it into the drink. At the sight of this, Dr. Johnson was horrified, didn't know what sort of town this was he'd come to, and he threw the lemonade out the window. I thought it was totally disgusting, but that was only the start of his sojourn into the Highlands with Boswell, because there was lots of things that Dr. Johnson didn't like about coming.
Johnson wasn't
to
happy about
Scotland.
Scotland. You can get the sun. I mean, it's a beautiful spring day here, not a cloud in the sky. Just showing you the
That's the
old church there, but the sun is right in our eyes here. It's so great to hear everything going again, and
the sounds of a working city coming back.
Yeah.
And then St. Ewart, this is the highest pub in Edinburgh, and we usually tell our clients, if you go in here, it's all downhill in more than one way. So.
This used to be known as St. John's Highland Toll Booth Kirk.
Yeah.
It used to be Highland. This is where they had all the services in Gaelic. But like most congregations here went into decline. The church lay empty for a good number of years. Now it's been repurposed.
Yeah.
And it's now the centre of the Edinburgh International Festival. So this is where you buy all your tickets for all the shows on the official festival. Not the fringe, but the official.
Yeah, I think the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland used to meet here too, in the hall. Well, no, on the hub, I think, Joe, and then it transferred
then
to
it transferred
being
to
over
here.
here.
This-
The other side, yeah.
Yeah. And what used to be known as St John's Highland Tolbooth Kirk, we now call it the hub.
The hub, yeah.
Yeah. We do that a lot in Scotland. We repurpose our churches.
Yes.
Up in Aberdeen, I've got one that's converted into a casino.
Right.
I always say you get salvation and damnation go hand in hand in Aberdeen. Some of them are nightclubs as well.
Yeah, yeah. And it was with the coming of the Free Church of Scotland, but it wasn't completely a white story with regard to the Free Church of Scotland, because I believe they went to America and raised money from the slave owners. And of course we talked about Frederick Douglass, so we have June Edgar, who's one of our colleagues. And if you look, I think it was on our hidden corner, she was talking about a black man who took the name of Douglas and lived in Scotland and had issues with the fundraising for the Free Church. So it's,
Edinburgh International Festival. Now what we're looking at here is the camera Obscura, and this was owned by Patrick Geddes, and he called it the Outlook Tower. It is an attraction, it's a great attraction to go into here. There we go. And what Patrick Geddes, he every floor had a different theme. So he started off with street, then city, then country, then continent, and then the world. And he would race his councillors right up to the top, because at the very top, up there, in the black and white tower there, you go inside it, and there is a mirror, basically, which brings a reflection of the whole city onto a table, and he would show them the 360-degree tour of Edinburgh. And by the time they got up there, they were all knackered. They're blood, because I've been in here many times, and you're exhausted when you get to the top. So he'd have them where their blood was still circulating through, and that's when he would do the big hard sell on them.
Yeah.
And then he'd bring them all down. So he wanted to get his message across while they were still panting around. But this is one of the oldest paid attractions in Edinburgh. It was started off by a woman, actually.
Mary Teresa Short.
Yeah.
And I believe it's something to do with, what was it now? Observatory.
It is, yeah.
It was at one point, maybe.
It used to be up on Carlton Hill, and then she moved here. The story goes that in Carlton Hill, again in the middle of the new town, it wasn't appropriate for young ladies to take men into dark rooms.
Yeah.
So they moved here because this was right next to the castle, and all the soldiers were here, and all the brothels were here anyway, so nobody cared.
And I believe it was termed, when Geddes got it, as a sociological laboratory.
Yeah.
And just about being aware not just of yourself, of your community, of your country, of Europe, of the world, and all the events that are going on, as we know, with the media. Then he would be well into communications, Geddes, so definitely ahead of his time. And I believe he had a house quite close to here, and if the camera obscura was working particularly well, it might have been able to be a bit of a peeping Tom into Patrick Geddes's window, which he was aware of, but it was carefully positioned so that would not be the case. But I remember as a very young boy, and this is going back a long time, and seeing the camera obscura, and they homed in on a person's window, and there was a man shaving with the old razor with the foam on his face and in his white vest, and it could pick out all the different things.
You can still do that.
You can still do that.
I know, because actually, when I was training to be a Blue Badge guide, I had a part-time job in there, and you can still focus in on people.
So maybe when there wasn't clients in, you could have a wee wander, a wee look.
But I'll tell you what they have got up, because you go right up to the roof here, and they've got these absolutely astounding binoculars up there. And on a clear evening, when you've got the moon out, you can see all the craters in the moon. It's really worthwhile doing it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So we're heading up to We're going to finish off up at the castle, shall we?
Yeah, I think that's
Get
a
some
good way.
views. I mean, look at the sky. There's not a cloud in the sky. The sun is
Getting
shining.
a lot of sun.
Lots of people.
And this is the old mill, isn't it? This is a tartan weaving
Yeah.
mill.
Well, this used to be the reservoir for the city.
That's right. For
Yeah.
the,
So the walls here are about 3 meters thick.
yeah.
And 2 meters thick, 6 feet thick.
Yeah.
And that's where the water was pumped in from the hills in here, and it ran down through gravity all the way down the town
yeah.
at all the the fountains that are there.
Right. Yeah, because if you go down the street a bit, as in many buildings in Edinburgh, it drops down quite far, and you can see where the reservoir was because of gravity. And there's a ball, isn't there, Joe, on the wall here, but we're probably not going to be able to point it out to the viewers very easily in case they spot it themselves, but it's like a cannonball, and it's, let's see.
I think we can see it better if we go up to onto the Esplanade, Mike. So this is Cannonball House here.
Cannonball House it's called, and it's because it's got the cannonball stuck in the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this used to be an old school.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be, it's now a really nice restaurant owned by the Contini family.
Yeah.
An old established Italian family here in Edinburgh. Lovely. But all the staff will tell you that it's haunted.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And the staff don't like being in there on their own. Let's have a wee look at the cannonball.
We'll have a look at the cannonball, yeah.
Just so we can show. I think you can see it better from this side. But the views today are just spectacular. And you can feel the warmth of the sun is coming back again.
Yeah.
So you can see it better from here. Just above the window, the middle window, the one to the left.
I don't know if I can do it. I'll do my thing.
Oh,
I'll
yeah,
tell you what. Do you want to do it, Joe? Just a finger pointing there, which you can't normally do apart from on a phone.
There.
Got it?
Right there.
Yeah.
Right there. That's the cannonball. And that's supposed to have been embedded during one of the sieges, whether it is or not. As I say, sometimes in Scotland you've got truths, half-truths and anything but the truth.
But they have been excavating, haven't they, for the new Virgin Hotel that Richard Branson's building, and they did find several cannonballs down in that site, down at the Grassmarket. Yeah. What a beautiful day.
Gorgeous.
Look at this.
Absolutely gorgeous.
You know,
And look at the architecture
blue
here of Ramsey
sky.
Gardens.
And the air is nice as well. It's got a light breeze, which is nice to walk in. So
I checked out the statistics of the YouTube, well, my nephews did, and we've had 97,000 hits on our YouTube channel in total since we started.
So if you haven't already done that, remember, subscribe to us on YouTube, and you can see our whole back catalogue. And if you look here at this building, that's Ramsey Gardens. And there are some original 18th century buildings around the corner that you can't quite see, but most of what you're seeing here was restored or even rebuilt under the kind of thoughts of Patrick Geddes to make a nice place to stay, but also had features of the Scots vernacular in terms of the buildings that would have been in Edinburgh's Old Town, which had been taken down. The difference with this, of course, is it would be built with brick and it would be long-lasting, but the building it was kind of imitating would have been done with clay infill and wood, and it wouldn't have been substantial, and it would have had a thatched roof and things like that. But all of this is
and I believe this was also designed for the university. Patrick Geddes actually stayed here, I believe, and he renovated this, and he was the first person to move in, and it was the first time to attract the middle classes back into the Old Town, because they'd all left it, gone into the new town, and the idea was to bring back, get the social classes mixing again, because the Old Town had become a bit of a slum.
And if you want to stay here, there is a luxury accommodation which is let out for people. I know the people that actually own it. They're called the Ramseys, funnily enough, and they've got a beautiful north-facing flat which looks out across to the Firth of Forth. So if you're looking for something special to commemorate, then you might want to look at Ramsey Gardens and look over there.
It all looks so higgledy-piggledy down there in the Old Town, doesn't it?
It does. You can see that castle-like structure with the clock and tower with the
there.
dome on the top. That's George Heriot's school.
George Heriot's School.
Built from the money left by his jeweller, George Heriot, who was jeweller to Queen Anne, who was the wife of King James VI in the 17th century. And today it's a private school, but it was built for orphaned, featherless bairns.
Featherless bairns.
Featherless bairns.
Edinburgh's
Children
orphans.
without fathers. And today there is a trust still there, so for widowed families or whatever, or who have not, or maybe lost a parent or parents, and they get their fees paid here at George Heriot's
Mike, you
School.
went to that school.
I went there. Yes, I did. I remember
See,
that.
I always forget that you're middle class.
Oh, come off it. But it was like Hogwarts.
Yeah.
And when I was there, the headmaster would have a mortarboard, a bit like Tom Brown's school days, and the black gowns and everything.
It is co-ed now. It's boys and girls.
And-
it used to be a boys' school.
And the head teacher is a lady today, whereas in its whole history, she's the first woman head teacher that they've actually had there.
And it was the inspiration for Hogwarts for J.K. Rowling's, because
Yeah.
just next to it was the cemetery where she got the names of the characters for the book as well. If we just come up a wee bit further, we'll get a view of Arthur's Seat.
Yeah, her two
And-
daughters, Jo, went there
Yeah, her daughters went there as
to
well.
George Heriot's. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll finish off.
So I hope you're enjoying our little virtual wander.
I know, it's a
on
wee
the
wander.
Esplanade.
And we'll finish off with a nice view of. Oh well, one bit we're going to talk about here, Mike, is the art school, the red building, which is just here.
Yeah, that building is 20th century, but the art college existed in Edinburgh. Well, a place for learning drawing and painting existed as far back as going to the 18th century.
Yep.
It relocated to different places, and then it ended up in this red building here. And Sean Connery, of course,
Yeah.
the actor, the James Bond, who was a model, life model.
Life model, nude model
Yes, he
in that school. Yeah.
delivered milk to people as a young man as well, was one of his jobs too. And I believe he was a coffin polisher, was one of the other things he did.
And so
But
we're going to finish off with a nice profile of Mike there. We've got Arthur's Seat in the background, the old extinct volcano.
what
we
a
can-
great city, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great on a day
you
like this.
can-
It's just gorgeous.
In a few minutes you can be out in the natural world there, not out of the city, into the country, not far away at all.